Hello and happy holidays to everyone. First off, I think a toast and cheers is in order because we've survived through most of 2020.
Yes.
So far.
Please don't taunt it. Please don't taunt it.
Yes. Yeah. We have learned far long ago, don't say anything. Well, bad stuff can still happen.
There are still 4 days left.
Nice knowing everyone.
Yes. Which is why I said most of. Anyway, this is going to be the Bay City Chronicles, I would say end of year retrospective, but this is really the past 3 or so years retrospective because we haven't done one of these in a while. So I'm here, I'm TG, I'm classing up the joint with cheap wine in a plastic cup because that's as classy as we get around here. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you can see here, we decided to have a little fun with how we're laid out tonight. So in honor of our layout, I'm going to introduce the rest of your team here. And we have Gutsman, a.k.a. Norestra. We have got Shademan, a.k.a. Crimson Avix. We've got Quickman over there, who is Chameleon Ice. We've got Dark Fowls, who is doing his best Shadow Man impression. And because we couldn't find anything in the classic series that fit, we've got OPT Lawyer down there pretending to be Launch Octopus.
And I would say that TG would be Brightman because of a certain thing that he likes to use, but that would give off a very, very false idea. So he'll just be Flashman.
Nice.
Touche! Touche!
Flashman works better anyway.
Yes, but the fact that there was such a lead up into the joke like makes that good.
I like it.
He's wearing pants, so yes. We should be safe.
God,
well, you said you weren't going to say anything! That lasted all 5 minutes. It's the last time I tell you a secret.
Some secrets are better left unsaid.
Yes.
We're not even 5 minutes into the stream and we've already talked about TJ's pants. Why, Nora?
We're not even 3 minutes into the stream. That was like 2.5.
So I guess before we get going too much, I suppose the sort of how this all happened should sort of be like the initial what happened. So if we rewind to 3 years ago, about give or take.
Yeah.
I had a job.
Nora had a job. No, but so we rewind and Chammy unfortunately wasn't a part of the crew yet, but he was around for pretty much from the beginning, like the only other person who watches us.
Yeah, you thank me for that because I kept dragging him into the stream, like, yo, come really watch this now.
Do I have to?
Yes.
Yes. So initially, how this was supposed to be is I wanted to teach a bunch of these guys how to play Mutants and Masterminds. And initially, a former friend of mine, was going to run the game, and we were going to do it. A week before we were supposed to start recording and go live, he has a meltdown on me. I'm not going to say what, because I honestly forgot about it now and forgot about what it was. And I haven't spoken with him since. So I had a week to prepare to do all this. And what we got is 3 years of not just Mutants and Masterminds, but we've run some masks, we've done a couple other things, and it's been pretty crazy.
Killed Nora in Electrical?
Yes, we have killed Nora several times in Electrical, but we'll get to that, I promise. Or maybe. So that's sort of how this all came about. And the reason I bring it up is because the aforementioned Chammy did have a question about the very beginnings of this, which actually is a great way, I think, to start here. And at the beginning of this, why did you all choose the characters you chose first? And were there any inspirations behind them?
So I'll go first with this.
Go ahead.
So Anton is obviously one of my multiple characters and personalities here.
No, Anton's the same one, just repurposed 14 times.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So Anton's inspiration, as you can see, if you ever played Overwatch, is kind of a Reinhardt-based, tanky, get in the middle and hit people around with the hammer. Being very new to D&D like games. This was my first game to play. And so I wanted a character that was basic, and the concept was simple. I'm going to get in the middle, and I'm going to hit things with hammer.
It worked.
And it did. And Anton was the most fun to play when he was doing what he was supposed to do, which is hit things with hammer.
Or get kicked through uprights.
Hey, we weren't going to talk about that till later.
Hey, you brought up the pants, I can bring up the uprights.
No, but but the basic inspiration there is that. But also, most games that I play a tank character. And so I wanted to play something I'm familiar with to give me that base.
No trouble?
I'm all about that base.
What? We were doing Mega Man reference.
Okay, so we have a new bingo card tonight, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, bingo cards were basically a staple early on in BCC. Our bingo card tonight did have a Megan Trainor reference, so if you had that on there, go ahead and mark it off.
Yeah, so the real quick was the joke in the bingo card. We haven't made one in a while, but we actually did have one made. And it was basically all the tropes that we used to go through. And the free space was me referring to a bright flash of light because that is my go-to trope.
Every episode there was a bright flash.
Yeah.
Yes. But getting back to the characters, so Krim, since you were so nice enough to speak out about the bingo card, what was the inspiration behind Phantasm?
Honestly, I don't remember. I don't remember.
Like, not moves, name, appearance, anything
Well,
like
it
that?
started as Spectre, if you remember.
So, really, the only motivation behind Phantasm is typically when I do tabletop, I like to run characters that sort of have an enigma to them. Because one of the best things about running a character like that is you can adapt them how you see fit to meet the rest of the party. And what I mean by that is I can come in and I can basically give a vague overview of what Phantasm is like. And how the characters interact with him and how the other personalities of the characters are. Well, now, what type of character do I want to play there? Do I want to be a divisive person? Well, now a little bit more comes out about my character that, ends up making an otter hate him. Or,
I mean, that's just the otter existing.
Right.
We'll get into that, don't worry.
Maybe I see that there's a big fracture in the group that no one can get along. Well, then my character, now he has a little more motivation to maybe be the leader of the group or something like that. So when I start out, I don't really divulge a lot of information about the character, even though I have a direction I want to go with him, and then I allow that to play out. So I allow a lot of flexibility early. So really, when I created Phantasm, outside of the name and the fact that I wanted him to start out wind-based and his history as a Air Force pilot, I didn't have much because I wanted to be able to adapt to the rest of the crew. Especially because, we were all newer to Mutants and Masterminds, but we had two people who were really new to RPing in general. So I needed to have a character that could be flexible to help support those people.
Yeah, and as the GM, I will 100% say that if you go back to look at the first season especially, you can clearly see from me as a GM the first couple episodes especially, I'm leaning heavily on Krim and what he can bring with Phantasm there, because I played tabletop games with him, so I knew what to expect. I knew OPT had played games before, but I didn't know how he played games, so I needed to get a couple episodes in to get that feel. And then, as Nora said, and Dark, neither one of them you guys had either played a tabletop before, so having the motivation with Phantasm and having, as a GM especially, having a character like that and a player like that is a godsend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just to be able to adapt and to have someone who's sitting there. And the other thing is, and this brings up, I wanted to get to this point later, but you brought it up now, is one of the things I like about what we've done as a whole has been the group communication with, hey, I want to do X, or hey, I want my character to go do this or do that. And to have that communication flow between player and GM, and not just when I'm GMing, but when Krim's GM, when OPT's GM, when Chammy's GM, all of that flow back and forth, that to me is fantastic, because you hear a lot of horror stories online about, well, Nightmare GM this or Nightmare player that, and there's that, when you have that open communication, yeah, there's still going to be things, as a group, people are going to get irked by, but when you have that open stream of communication, they're a lot less frequent.
Right.
Also, I think along those guidelines, another key aspect of that is what type of RPing do you want to do? Are you playing a game to just go and battle? Or are you playing a game that you want to develop a great storyline? And if you're going for the storyline, like, I would say 75% of our sessions, we're so heavily reliant on RPing that we don't remember many of the battles. And I think that's actually great. Yeah. The fact that we are sitting here streaming this, or, RPing in the background, and we are basically ad hoc writing a book.
Right, exactly.
No, absolutely.
And to me, that's my favorite part of RPing. And if I'm not getting that from a game, I'm going to be disinterested very, very quickly.
Right.
And I think we'll touch on this more, but I mean, our best episodes were combat free.
Yeah, and that became very clear, I'd say somewhat quickly. I remember, because I came from playing like D&D, Iron Claw, where you would have like at least one encounter like every single, like Pathfinder or whatnot. Like there was really encounter based, and I remember like, one episode we didn't have any combat. I'm like, well, that, it made sense and it's fine and whatnot. And then there would be some stretches where we'd have multiple episodes, and I'm like, I don't even care that we're not having combat. It's just way too much fun. Just having like the interaction and whatnot. And sometimes you could just role play through an encounter or whatnot, and you're not even rolling dice, and that's fine. It doesn't, or maybe you are like, for skill checks or whatever, but you're not like sitting there rolling your abilities and whatnot because you don't need to. I mean,
and let's face it, for Dark, that was probably the best thing that we weren't rolling dice too much.
Absolutely.
I did get most of the kills.
He did, yeah.
You would do nothing the entire time and then kill steal.
The question is, in the retrospective, can Dark make it out of here without rolling a 1?
I mean, I don't think we're rolling dice tonight, so I think we're good.
I doubt it.
I will say, going back off what you guys are saying about the RP, a lot of it shows the strength of the characters. We had multiple sessions where people are like legitimately emotional more than once.
Oh god,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know.
Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into that a little bit later. But because that actually begs the next question here is continuing on, Dark. You were the other one coming into this who you had like experience with World of Warcraft and things like that, but never sort of the tabletop RP. What was your inspiration behind Malk?
Well, I did have some experience. I wasn't fully in the Dark. I had a lot of one-shot experience, which wasn't like a campaign per se, but I like day sessions. Malkier was a mix of. I'm a very large book reader, so I went off characters from books that I've read, and just kind of like the persona I wanted to play. And coming into this as someone who hasn't RP'd a lot, I had to change the way I played him, because I know at the start, me and OPT brought ahead a few times just because of the way I played the character and how I morphed him coming from that.
Yeah, and before we get into the whole Luthor inspiration, I actually want to bring this up here as, we brought up that Nora and Dark, neither one of them had a lot of RP experience going into this. And if you want to take the time to go back and look through the progression of at least the first 5 seasons of Bay City Chronicles, and even into the 6th one, you can see the difference. You can see the growth in everyone, but especially the 2 who hadn't done anything. Because those first couple episodes, there's RP, but there's not a lot of RP. It's getting yourself comfortable. By the end of it, there's you guys just nope, I'm going to sit back, relax, don't have to worry about anything, and you guys are just going to town. And from a GM's perspective, that's fantastic.
Their comfort levels were just so high.
Oh, yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
It was so amazing to watch that.
And now you'll give us unlimited power.
Phenomenal cosmic power! Living space.
Right.
Speaking of itty bitty living spaces, what was the motivation behind Luthor?
So
we've all seen the inside of Luthor's apartment when he was on Spark or Jolt or whatever we named it.
Yeah, that's true.
Blitz is what it was.
Yeah. And in his apartment before that, actually. No, so the inspiration I had was simply, I've played a lot of different characters before, as far as both human and non-human characters, and I'm like, I've never done anything water-based. I wanted to do something water-based. I'm like, okay, what can I have for that? Otters. They're fun. I like that. Okay, great. Why is there an otter, like an anthropomorphic otter, walking around Earth right now? Because we hadn't established, it's a comic book world. I mean, as much as it was, we hadn't established, non-humans were on the planet. So I'm like, okay, so that we came from space. Well, how did you get there? Well, I don't know. It's just, then I'm like, well, there's Superman. Let's go ahead and build off of that, except make it worse. As in, not so happy, oh, he got raised by a family. No, let's make it horrible. And that storyline, kind of developed over even the first season and whatnot, just in my head, what it was, the start of the whole thing in general. Because when I first had the idea, Luthor wasn't supposed to be as skittish as he was. He was supposed to have just been found by scientists, just raised by scientists, and just be technological water thing. And then it's well, that's not as fun as being horribly experimented on by scientists and having escaped from them and being the scariest little thing you could ever have. So it was just one of the
Yeah. And the fun part about that is it tied into something I had in the background planned for something later that was accelerated because I was hey, I have this idea, I want to do this. And I'm like, as a matter of fact, I have something that this can tie into.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that happened here has been the sort of, I have a vague outline and a vague idea, and we just sort of ran with it. And come up with things on the fly. Half of what came up, and more than half of all the things we've done here have been improvisations and things on the fly. But before we get on to everything else, Chammy, if you think you're getting out of this question without answering it, you're wrong. Just because you asked it. Yes, you asked it. What was your inspiration for Kestrel?
Probably multiple places. Ironically, not Rocky and Bullwinkle. Everybody was kind of saying that when I made them. But for a while, I actually really liked the idea of having a flying squirrel type character. And I was at the time playing Suikoden 2.
I love that game, my favorite game of all time.
And they had the
There's some love to Muku Muku.
Yeah, Muku Muku. They had flying squirrels in there, and I also really like the flying squirrel design from, of all places, the Little Nemo in Dreamland movie.
Also a fan.
Yeah.
Funny story about that. Funny story. Yes, I have a story about that. Back in college, I had a keychain that used to have Nemo, the fish, on it. So people started calling me Nemo instead of my real name, and that's when I discovered that, oh, hey, there's an entire other Nemo thing besides Finding Nemo. There's Adventures in Dreamland, and oh my gosh, I watched the movie. That's fantastic.
It's adorable. Yeah.
Yes, it is adorable.
That is just so cute.
And the video game is hard as heck.
Yes, it is. Unfair. But after watching OPT do things for a while, I'm like, I gotta think of something that would be kind of cool here. I just pretend to be in the background, doing my own adventures, drawing up characters. And so I made up Kestrel. So I thought it would be kind of fun to fit that in there. And
we fit it in all right.
Yeah.
I want to get a superhero kind of like thought. I thought, well, how about an animal sidekick that lost his hero? So now he's like just a superhero. And so that's kind of why I just built off of, and we just find out what came from there. And since I'd watched you guys for so long, it was very easy to make Kestrel into a fanboy personality and act like he'd been reading the Bay City comics this entire time, and he knew all this stuff. So it made it kind of easy to slip in that way.
I think this has to transition into the next piece.
It does segue into the next piece, which I was going to get into some of the more fun moments that we've had to, but bring up the fanboy stuff sort of brings me to the first real crazy RP moment that we had here, which was, of course, water skiing.
Ah, yes.
So, Krim, I believe that was your idea to do it, correct?
That was an off-the-cuff idea. I really hadn't planned it, and then while we're going through, I'm like, you know what? Let's take the otter water skiing.
Yes.
Because at that time, to me, just as another player, it felt like the story needed something to really break Lutra in as an established character. Not that OPT wasn't doing great with Lutra's RPing, but the game itself felt stagnant. And to me, and I actually had this talk, and this was the only thing that really was discussed about anything beforehand, is I had a discussion with TGE about how I felt I was overwhelming the story with my Phantasm character. And so I sort of wanted to force another character into the limelight. And I figured that was probably the best way of doing so.
No, agree 100%.
I remember, like, in Lutra's mindset when that happened, like, that was something he really needed, and I don't remember exactly when that happened. It may have been right after Paradise Lost.
I think it was right after Paradise Lost, which was...
Yeah.
If you ask me of all the things we've done, that episode in particular, I love so much. Also, you guys here in chat will appreciate this. I'm memeing Dark in our Discord call here.
Well, actually, it was. Let me see. According to, because I actually put up Cham's art in the.
This episode 2.4.
Yeah, 2.4. So it was a little, not long, but
it was after.
Yeah,
right. Because Paradise Lost was 1.8.
Paradise Lost.
To be fair, I had
110,
ones or 20s. There was really nothing in the middle.
Yes, that is true.
Not wrong.
So yeah,
but, and a lot of that staleness came from my job and me not being around as much. I know early on in the season I was traveling a lot, and we had to fill in a space. So that was a great opportunity to expand Lutra's role as the character.
He jumped right into it too.
Right.
It became very apparent as I was watching, especially that. When you give OPT an inch for story, he will take a mile. You like getting into it.
First of all, you all will do that, not just OPT. You all do that.
Yeah, yes. But no, I remember watching this episode in a hotel while on the road for work, and just thinking and watching how amazing that scene really was.
Mm-hmm.
It was very emotional.
Yeah, because if you go back to it, like I said, Paradise Lost, which we'll get to in a minute, was a very, very emotionally heavy, thick scene.
Yeah.
And the water skiing was the complete opposite of that. It was just fun, having a good time. I vividly remember describing what happened when Malkir took the boat up the wave, roll a 1, and then up in the water, just steam coming off him because of the fire.
Right.
Just sitting there with like the Ralphie pouty face on. Yeah. And then we turn that into that whole thing into a thing, because it went from Lutra having this whole "no, I shouldn't be here" to "look, dude, you're trending."
Yeah, that was the first time Lutra had been out in public like that. And I remember when this water skiing was done, he pulls up onto the beach and everybody's staring at him, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't change my he didn't morph into his or." Change into his human form." And the funniest thing about that is I didn't actually plan that. I just remember one point thinking, I never said Lutra changed into his human form. Okay, that happened.
Which was part of the plan we were going for.
Right. I'm like, I never said he did that. Okay, well, I guess he didn't. So, never mind. That's a thing now. And
there's so much of that off the cuff stuff.
Oh yeah,
too. That's the greatest part about what Teach has done as a GM, and what Krim and OPT and Chammy now as we have our different shows. The freedom.
Oh yeah.
To just come up with something stupid and run with it.
I mean, we have the goose.
Yeah. We have a goose. The amount of stupid that we've come up with. Yeah. Let's just talk about some of the stupid we've come up with.
No, absolutely. But yeah. So before we get into that, the other thing I wanted to ask here is because we have a bunch of running me, and pretty much every person, every player here has their own sort of one or two things that they've sort of become their own sort of meme. Me with the bright flash of light, Nora with the randomly showing up things. But the one I want to ask about, the one that I have wanted to know the origin of for 3+ years. Hey, Dark, where'd the Sudoku come from?
That's fair.
I used to work at a gas station, and I'd be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning in a very small town that didn't wake up until 10 o'clock. So I had 4 hours where I did nothing but play Sudoku.
Nice. Makes sense.
So we're just putting a little bit of your real-life character into character.
Basically.
I love it.
I remember when coming up with Lutra's inability to understand language properly, all because you asked me Casey had said something up his sleeve and whatnot, and you messaged me or something, or maybe you just said it would Lutra understand what that meant or whatnot? And I'm like, hold on a second. I think I rolled a coin flip. I'm like, nope, he doesn't. And ever since that point, I'm like, okay. So at this point, Lucha's just a very literal person because he's he looks at him, does he doesn't have any sleeves on.
Oh, that's when the question started.
No, that was later. That was later. That was seriously
it was
the
soon
5th
after
episode.
that.
No. It was that.
It was a while.
The question started when Anton and when Lutra were on a boat in Egypt.
Yes.
That was the first one because that was about Taco
one?
Tuesday.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Anton got Taco Tuesday.
Yeah.
You have no idea how hard it was at some point to keep coming up with weird questions like that.
I think my favorite part was during the whole thing, you come up to a character, hey, so-and-so, and whoever the player was, you would see the eye roll immediately.
Even when I wasn't doing that, I would get that. I'm like, oh.
Who's so prepped for it?
That's why I would always preface that with the, there's something that's been bothering me for quite some time, or something like that, because then it's I'm asking something stupid.
I mean, honestly, the best running gags with this have been stuff that's just been completely random that it comes about.
Yeah.
But after that, it's just probably one of the most entertaining ones is Lutra's crossbow ability.
Yeah, exactly.
and just constantly hitting Anton.
Yeah.
Because your first roll just happened to be a critical miss on it.
Horribly, this makes sense because he's never used this before.
Yep, it was so good.
We even did a scene where Melchior was trying to help Lutra learn how to aim and whatnot. And if I remember right, the very next combat, the first roll I did with that was pretty decent, and then after that it just went downhill again.
It was to the point where I actually uploaded the sound effect in the.
Yep. I'm surprised we haven't
used the crossbow again.
Yeah, he used it a lot in Anton's backside.
In recent times, I think you just briefly stopped using it altogether.
Oh, just because
Anton's not around. Well, no, it was used. It hit Anton in retirement.
Yeah,
in London.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
it's one of those things that just because Lucha tries to get in close and does, like, just getting close a lot. The only reason I wanted the crossbow was, one, story, and two, just as a ranged, like, thing in case. But
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then it quickly became apparent to me that, like, I can actually just get in. Lucha can actually just get in, like, into, like, somebody's face a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. And latch on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, continuing on with the whole, like, moments and all the fun stuff. So we talked about how water skiing was sort of the Lucha getting really enveloped and welcomed into the team. That's not the only time we've had something crazy happen to sort of welcome somebody into the team. So I'm going to cede the floor to two people here. Can you explain to me the origin of Squirrel with a Pile Driver?
This is like one of the best moments of that.
This one was fantastic. So this was like, this is first, second episode with Chammy added in.
Yes.
It was very soon after I came on.
And, I hadn't really, like, not necessarily clicked, but Anton hadn't really clicked with anyone as, like, a duo. Like, Dark and Lucha and Phantasm had all kind of...
Yeah, they were a good trio.
Well, Phantasm had his own arc there.
Right, yes. Phantasm was kind of all around.
But so we introduced Kestrel, and I'm like, I'll go with Kestrel. We'll see what happens. And I'm sitting here. We just revamped Anton's armor because I wasn't happy with how the character was playing.
Right.
And I'm like,
where we actually had the Anton device, which that was the other fun thing was I would just come up with like, all right, guys, I need an acronym for this, and someone would come up with it.
Right. Well, so we're sitting here, and it's the first scene. And I'm like, I want to really stretch this device and see how stupid I can make it. And
that really set the tone for it too.
Well,
it really did.
It started kind of a trend though, because what happened is that you told us ahead of time, hey, you guys are going to be having a scene together. You're driving off there. We'll get back to you. And then all of a sudden, Nora and I are like, well, we got some time to think.
Yep.
And that's a GM's biggest mistake, giving Chammy and myself time to think.
Or just best tools sometimes. And if I
mean, we just started talking about, like, what would be a good idea to do here? What do we need? Do this, do that.
If I remember correctly, that was just a very well-timed scene, too, because it came off of something much heavier.
It did. It came off of something crazy heavy. But for those wondering, I did put the Anton abbreviation into the chat, which was Automated Nanotechnological Tactical Offensive
Neutralizer,
And honestly, the whole moniker of never give time to me and Chammy because we can come up. Actually, TGE was probably very appreciative of that because that's 45 minutes that he didn't need to do filler for.
Exactly. Anytime I give these guys time and they just, as a GM, the happiest you can be is when you set up a scene with 3 or 4 sentences and then 45 minutes later you haven't said a word because your players are just going back and forth.
Right.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. But so you put Anton in a tight situation though, because what had happened was we were locked in with the Gen Tech people. Yep. Anton's wife was in trouble.
That's right. Yes. It has to be how fast Kestrel could get there.
And Kestrel and Anton were locked in together. So the solution was get Kestrel out and Anton would go postal.
Right, yeah. Get Kestrel out, get him to Midnight City, aka New Orleans, and go to town.
Yep.
And so I want to say that Chammy and I, while you went off to the other scene, shut off like 3 messages and finally we went, no. I have a better idea. Yeah. And then we just went with it.
It was pretty fun. We didn't know how it would end.
I mean, to divert the conversation a little bit here, because this happened quite a bit, and it kind of stems from a real life friendship, going beyond just the 6 of us, and we're all friends. Don't take this as only a couple of us are friends. Like OBT and Cham have obviously been friends the longest out of any of us, but I mean, we're all friends here beyond just a group of 6 people tabletopping together. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that some of the most brilliant aspects of what has happened in Bay City Chronicles has happened in car rides.
It had. No, he's not wrong.
No.
Shiny gaudy car rides. Shiny
Well, if everyone can recall back to the initial transfer from the TGE-centric BCC to the story that I sort of ran with in the alternate universe, where Stallone was really heavily introduced and everything, that all came about on a trip from Maine down to Boston to watch a Red Sox game.
Yep.
Oh, you mean like a real life car ride? Okay.
Real life car rides.
Okay,
So what happened?
A lot of free time.
Yeah. So the story behind that is my mother calls me. She's like, "Hey, I got 2 tickets to a Red Sox game. You want them?" And of course, I'm a Red Sox fan. My response is, "Yeah." "When are they for?" She goes, "Sunday night, Red Sox Yankees." "Hold on, I'm making a phone call." Call up the phone. Krim doesn't answer because his son's on the phone. Calls me back. "What?" I go, "What are you doing Sunday night?" Meet me in Boston.
2 of Malkir's best scenes were developed when me and Tej went to go visit Krim.
Nice.
Yep.
We were talking in our hotel room at like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yep, that has happened.
Which makes me really disappointed that I'm the only one who's not met any of you in person.
Doesn't make the rest of us disappointed that we haven't met you.
No, absolutely.
Nor you'd have to leave your house for that.
No, and to that friendship thing, a little serious. Yeah, the last 2 weeks have been rough for me, and I've been checked on every day by one of y'all, and I appreciate that a lot. That's how much our friendship is we make sure that everyone's okay.
We care about you guys.
Absolutely. No, this has been like I've gone through a lot, like in my own personal life over these last 3 years, as far as like mental health and whatnot goes. And I gotta say, if I did not have the friendship that you guys bring, not just like the games, the tabletop and whatnot, if I didn't have the the 5 of you here, like this would have been a very, very much rougher like last 3 years for me. So yeah, no, this has brought the fact that this has brought us all together, like friendships that we all kind of had individually, we've all now kind of like molded into this, and it's great. And it just, to me, just shows, the reach of just gaming in general and how that can turn things into much more longer lasting friendships. It's nice.
Going back to why we started this, it's been said that I never played D&D much growing up. That's because I didn't really have a lot of friends in my area that played D&D. In the days before the internet, if you didn't have a group of people that wanted to play, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. What were you saying, Chammy?
Oh, well, I was going to say, like, from the perspective of, like, initially the outsider looking in, like, it is really amazing to me, and it was super amazing to me to watch how things started initially, especially when I knew OPT very deeply, and to, like, see how things started, like, opening up, and, like, just seeing how, like, the rapport started getting better, and just seeing how, like, the conversation started getting, like, more friendly and more just personal, and, like, everybody started to get to really know each other and get really tight-knit. And it was really amazing just kind of see that just take place.
So, funny you bring that up, the whole outsider thing. So, I suppose I should bring up this for the people who haven't... I know we've had the conversation, but for the people who might be watching this, when we got to the point where we got to the end of, like, Season 3, I think it was, like, I think we need to add somebody else, because that was when Nora was... we didn't know people's schedules. We wanted to have at least 3 to 4 people around. So, we're having a conversation, and I'm like, hey... What if we bring in Chammy? And everybody within 3 seconds, yes! Like, there was zero hesitation from anybody.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, I knew, it was one of those things where I'm like, I don't want to influence everybody because he's, like, my best friend, but, I'm also like, and I know he's really good at games like these, so, but no, everyone's like, yes, absolutely, and as you can see, the characters around our portraits, these are all his work.
Every single one of them.
You guys gave me lots of money. I mean, you guys, we made
that. But I mean, I've gone to Cham to commission work for other games I play and other communities that I work with. He's done posters for me for events, and there's no one else I would go to right now because he's just that good.
Absolutely.
Your commission's open?
Yeah, my entire Twitch layout is done by Chammy.
I mean, it's been a lot of fun. I got to expand my horizons because of you guys.
Like, we made you draw humans.
I've drawn humans before. Just once a year, maybe. I don't know. Especially.
I have to say, I think I was the hardest because by nature, by the time we got around to getting portraits for our characters, Phantasm had already become a darker character.
Yes.
And I think that really, like, I was very demanding on you on what I wanted from Phantasm
I had
because
to change that magic so much.
yeah, just because like your cartoon ability has a lot of liveliness to it, and it was just difficult to really get that dark feeling. So yeah, I had you change that magic like 10, 11, 12 times.
So many times. Like, brooding? Do you mean like Disney brooding? Or like Miyazaki brooding?
I love that Disney brooding is a description.
I mean, it is.
It is.
I mean, I guess the best way I could describe that brooding now, in retrospect, is Ursula's colors with Hades' temperament.
Yeah, that works.
So Disney brooding.
Disney brooding.
Yes.
Well, I mean, to fit his art style, yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the characters you see around here, those aren't just the only ones. Like, I personally, I have 3 pieces of Chammy art. I've got Ven, who you see here. We'll get into that one in a minute. If you see the game that actually Chammy runs for us in Masks, he's done Henry there. And he's actually done Hunter, who, you know, is Hub. But Hunter, you guys know, he's also got a version of Hunter that is actually my phone background right now. And it's awesome because the way the drawing works out, the way my apps are, the apps are here, and you can just see his mask peeking out through the apps on my phone. It's awesome.
That is awesome.
But yeah, I mean, in the other stuff, you know, we've got like Apollo with his paw strats.
Yep. The one pun I made that they liked.
Yes.
The only pun that we'll ever like.
You and far between.
And Drake, the other character that I play, you know, the art that Chammy's provided for us is given much more life to our characters. Yeah. Like, honestly, being able to see them made it easier to roleplay them.
Oh, yeah.
And it has.
Absolutely.
Which I appreciate.
Yeah, to go back there for a second, the character you see next to me, Ven, that's not I introduced him here in BCC, like, so you guys know him, but he's a character I've been playing in the IRL game I have in Masterminds, and I've been playing him since 2015. And when I created him, I was in a rough spot. Like, I created him before I knew any of you people. Like, I was in a pretty rough spot, and sort of like the creating of him and his backstory was an outlet for me. So I've wanted art of him for years at that point when I commissioned it from Chammy, but there wasn't anybody I trusted with that art. So, and I'm like, oh no, I need to get this, And every time I would be like, hey, I hear you do commissions, and then I just delete the post and wouldn't send it, because there was such a connection there, like, to me and this character, that there wasn't anybody, like, I wasn't willing to send that off to somebody to have it done.
Jeez.
So, yeah. So that I mean, I just want to point out that, like, that's the personality and the art that you've shown. Like, that's what you've done. Like, for someone who's like, no, I want this art, but I could never pull the trigger on it. Yeah.
Well, jumping into Ven, though, like, we all introduced our characters properly and, like, inspirations and all that jazz. Like, where did Ven and Hunter come from?
So, well, Ven, like I said, Ven was from the IRL game. I have been working on, and the certain person we have in chat, Slow Games over there, knows about it because I've sent it to them. I have 100 and some odd pages of Ven's backstory that I'm continuing to work on, so that's where Ven came from. Hunter is a little bit of a different story. So the way I tend to GM here is any character that I've made in other games, to me, is part of my canon, and I tend to use them. So Hunter was from a Masks game that I had initially played. And the funny thing is Hunter was never supposed to be a character. Okay? Hunter was never supposed to be a character. Because if you remember correctly, you guys didn't get introduced to Hunter first. You got introduced to the snarky AI called Hub.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
And Hub, as the snarky AI, was, again, another Mega Man reference, was a little tongue-in-cheek reference to the Mega Man Battle Network series, where Hub is the real name of Mega Man in that game, because it was the main character's twin brother who died young, but they preserved his mind in the internet as the Mega Man character. So the two characters are Hub and Land. So that was Hub was the little tongue-in-cheek reference to that. So eventually, I forget exactly how we got there, but I came up with what if we do blah? And you guys eventually found the room in the back of Casey's office where you found the kid. So Hunter, the initial character for Hunter, before the mask character or anything like that, Hunter came from the fact that I needed to come up with an acronym for Hub, H-U-B, as initials.
I assumed you had like in your lexicon from something like way back when you just dragged him forward.
No, so Hub was supposed to be the AI, and then because I believe it was a conversation I was having with Krim. It's like, well, what is Casey's motivation? Why all this? Why all that? And we can get into that. But okay, he's here to protect his son, who is doing all of this, which turns out to be again Hub. So he called him Hub because I live up here in Maine. We've all seen the backpacks with the initial on them, LL Bean. Big and huge for them, but you see backpacks when you're in high school with your initials on them. So I'm like, what if Hub, H-U-B, is the kid's initials? So I need to come up with, okay, the H and the B are pretty easy. Like, you can come up with H first names and B last names. U. Where the heck am I going to find a U middle name? So I went to behind the name, the website, and I'm like, okay, I need U name. And Ulrich came up, and I'm like, that's perfect. Ooh, it's just pretentious enough. So Hunter sort of happened because the story progressed there, and I literally just had to wing it. And the rest of the story behind Hunter, his father didn't know he had, that was all improvised, which allowed Krim to take that story with the whole Siobhan angle and expand upon it. Like, all of that you see with the, he is, but he isn't the real kid. That was all him, again, improvised.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think even a lot of our group knew that is, you had Hunter as Hub, but Hunter's backstory was created by me.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the weird thing about that is TG basically told me the bare minimum of Casey being his father, but the entire motivation behind Hunter's backstory was Sloan. Mm-hmm. It was actually creating the story for an evil character that you guys didn't even know was going to become truly evil. Yeah. And that's what created Hunter's backstory.
Yeah. So my character, I literally had, very little hand in his backstory.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think that does speak to, once again, just how much this story really just expanded beyond what a typical Mutants Masterminds series of sessions would be. Mm-hmm. Is this, to me, was never a tabletop game. This, to me, was a real-life 6-person discussion of an actual comic book. We were creating a comic book that just never made it to print.
Yeah, not wrong. Yeah. And Teach and Krim have been the GMs, but we've all GM'd it. We've all pushed the story on our own. No one was drug along with the story.
Yeah. Everyone's had their own arcs.
Yeah,
and I think we set that standard very early when. Even in the first season, basically, Teach giving me free reign on what I wanted to do with my character.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And the discussions, more than anything, the open discussion with our GMs about, I want my character to go this way, or the writing sessions. We haven't even touched on those.
Oh yeah, we can get to those, and I want to continue on that, the discussions, but ultimately, as a group, the level of trust that you as players have, not just me as a GM, but we have with all the GMs here, because I know a lot of people, I brought it up with the Ven and the character art thing. OCs, original characters that you play a lot with, you become attached to them. And it takes a lot for you to allow somebody who isn't you to have a little bit of creative freedom with them. Well, and the fact that everyone's been willing to do that is amazing.
And I think to expand on that a little bit, this is the first session that I've ever been a part of where all the players have had free reign of, during an interaction with discussion, saying, give me an insight check.
Yeah.
Give me a perception check.
Yeah.
And actually doing that so we can give an actual valid and verified response from our characters on how they would respond based off of that roll.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like me saying, hey, give me an insight check, and that character rolls well. Okay, well, you're going to see something about my character that's going to be a huge tell, and I'm going to give you that information. The GM's not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Because half the time when that happens, I, as the GM, I don't even know what's about to be said. So it's like, okay, you notice this. And then as a GM, I'm like, well, crap, now I have to react to that too. Which is great, because if I'm playing an NPC in that scene, I'll roll as a GM, and if I get a higher score than the PC or whatever, I'll have that same information. If I didn't, I have to react like I don't know that information. And that, to me, is fantastic as well.
Oh, yeah.
Also, speaking, if we're talking about insight checks and all that, I do have to give all of you one last bit of shade if we go all the way back to Season 1, and not a single one of you got the baseball reference for the A's. I'm still mad at you about that. That A is for athletics.
I was never going to get that. And that
He was never.
I got it.
No.
Yeah, but you weren't there for that session.
Yeah. The one time we needed you. No.
Yeah, so funny thing is that session, so that whole arc, by the way, that whole little section with the A is for... The best part about this is, okay, the best part about this session is I knew Krim wasn't going to be around for a session, and I knew I was going to visit him like a week and a half, 2 weeks later. So I run the session with OPT, Nora, and Dark. And it's the one where they went up to the mansion in the mountains. And at that point, I hadn't run the session with Krim. And I knew he was going to be there. So I had to run the session with you guys and pretend like I knew what had happened in Krim's session, when I actually had no clue about it until 2 weeks later when we ran it in person.
So you preempted what Krim would possibly do?
No.
Yep, and I didn't preempt it. If you go back and listen, I'm vague on purpose.
Right.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm vague on purpose.
Being vague is a pretty standard thing.
Yes, but this one was me being vague on purpose, so I had wiggle room.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, that session with you and Krim almost had Phantasm killing Dr. Casey or something like that.
Yes, it did not go the way TGE intended.
Nope. And here's the best part, okay, is we're playing this, we're sitting down at his kitchen table, we're across the table, and instead of having the text message conversation between Phantasm and Dr. Casey be in words like normal people, no, we're literally writing out the text messages on a piece of paper and passing it back and forth across the table.
What?
Yes!
What an authentic way to do it.
Yes, yes. So we're doing this, like, the Red Sox and Astros game is on TV,
okay.
We're doing this, the scene ends, like, no, because like, we're watching it, we're doing this, and then the scene ends, and we look at each other and go, wait, we just did that, we never said a word.
Yeah, we're listening for trash cans.
Right, yeah, there you go. That's amazing.
Oh, but to that, though, and this is kind of the same thing, we had some writing prompts. I know I was in...
Oh, yeah.
I was in Dallas on a work trip, and 1 week, teacher's like, here is what we need from you. We need, everyone needs to write a summary of what you did over the break. Because, we took a break in between seasons. And that was some of the most fun. I don't like to write. I've never been a good writer. I don't enjoy it. I loved every minute of that. Yeah. Coming up with a story and tying it together with everyone else's. None of us talked to each other about the prompts, but all of our prompts tied together very well.
Yeah.
I find that so fascinating. And then, like, you did that thing called, you called them love letters, I think.
Yes, love letters. So, So from a GM perspective, a love letter is actually something I learned GMing masks, because it actually tells you about them. I forget which source book it is. And a love letter is basically something you give to your players as a sort of, hey, time's passed for a little bit, you've dealt with this specific thing. And usually it has a result of either good or bad. So I gave all of the players, including Kestrel, like his first, like Chammy's first scene what in the entire game was him reading this love letter. Like we had never met Kestrel before. His first scene was, here's this love letter. And it was to establish why he was at the base and to get him there. But the love letters are basically sort of a, hey, you've been off on your own for X amount of time, you've been doing this. Like, and if you roll well on what happens with the love letter, you get a bonus. If you roll poorly, there's something bad happens. And they're a GM narrative way of, okay, there has been a skip in time in the story. It's a way to get back into it while still keeping things fresh with the characters and not jumping into something completely new. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's where the love letter concept comes from. And it's one of those things where I like to use them because they're fantastic, but you have to use them sparingly because, a love letter every 3 episodes isn't going to do you much good.
Right.
No, I love the writing prompts. Honestly, those are. I mean, I like. At that point, I love writing like for Lucha in general. I was so connected to him. I ended up like pounding out this. I'm looking at it now.
I remember
14-page interlude between like seasons 1 and 2 just for Lucha. Which includes a part that Tej and I had to like role played out.
Yeah, we actually role played it out, and for the record, I did read every page of that.
Oh, thank you.
Like
I think we all.
Every prompt that you guys sent me, I have read and incorporated it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, like if the one that OPT's talking about, there's this very end with Lutra and Declan, who we can get to Declan in a minute because he was a big part of the 5-parter. Yeah. And we actually got into a voice call and role played out the conversation. Mm-hmm. That's like the conversation you see written in that interlude is the conversation that we role played out.
I recorded it and then transcribed it word for word. Maybe like I added like a little extra, like, not in dialogue, but a little extra description as to
a little flourish here and there.
Yeah, but like the dialogue itself is as best as I could, word for word, what we said.
Yeah. So I brought up Declan here because, we joke about 1,000 Heartbeats part 4,328 because it went into a 5-part little arc. And that's the next question I wanted to ask all of you is, whether it's a standalone episode or an arc, what's your favorite episode or arc that we've done?
I'll go first on this. And it's going to seem like a cop-out and it's going to seem vague, but the arc that I was able to do with Phantasm has to be my favorite thing that I've ever done in tabletop.
Nice.
Because there was so much change that Phantasm went through that impacted everything else. And the arc was just special because right at about the point that Phantasm went from wind to his dark being, the thing I said to Tej, and it was just a simple message, is I hit a wall with Phantasm. I don't know where to progress with him. Mm-hmm. And Tej's response was, where do you want to take it? It wasn't figure something out, or, then do you want to make a new character? It was, do what you want with his character, and we'll adapt to it. And, I mean, honestly, doing that type of arc opened up an entire volume for us. Yeah. And just being able to tell the story of Phantasm that I was able to, and we'll get to the emotional ending later.
Yeah.
But being able to tell that entire story was probably one of my favorite things. And going back to the sappy stuff that we've been discussing about friendships and everything, pretty much the entire arc of Bay City Chronicles, I've been going on through a lot of personal stuff. And even though it wasn't verbatim, like, imaging my life, a lot of frustrations that I was dealing with, I was able to sort of extrude through Phantasm, and that made it a memorable arc for me because it was a coping mechanism and a way to get frustration out in a different medium than what I was actually dealing with.
Yeah, it is nice when you have an outlet for stuff like that, and it's just the fact that you put a lot of not only thought but just a lot of emotion into that whole arc, and it's really one of the few character arcs I've seen in a game like this that actually had a beginning and an end. Like, a lot of times the games I'm in just kind of flounder off and don't really have much of an ending, but this was a full character completion. It felt really good at the end of it.
The thing that was the most impressive part of that to me is I am notorious for when I have a great idea or when I'm involved in a great idea, I want to spoil it to somebody. The fact that neither Krim nor I spoiled what the ultimate end goal was for Phantasm's arc, to me, is a reward in itself.
Yeah.
Because him and I knew what was coming. We had to.
Yeah.
To go back and to look, and if you go back to that episode, I really didn't do the ending of that. Krim sort of narrated the ending. And I had the pleasure of listening and watching all of your reactions as he's describing this. Mm-hmm. And the genuine emotion from you guys about that was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, I remember I had in the middle of that episode. I don't remember exactly when, but I know there's one point where I'm I now know I figured this is gonna end this way. This is gonna happen, but I still wasn't ready for Lutra's reaction to it. Because it's one of those things I had an idea, but you never know until it actually happens, right? And I'm mm-hmm. I remember thinking, how devastated is Lutra going to be from this? Because at that point, Lutra and Phantasm, Lutra looked up to Phantasm a ton at that point. He was really, in that universe, he was really the first friend outside of Dr. Yours that he had ever had. So to lose that, it was just... It was emotional, and it also helped me spawn into his next arc, which I think is one of my favorite arcs I've ever done.
Yeah, and I mean, there was many reasons why I ended up ending the Phantasm arc. First of all, the purpose of Phantasm in that arc was really to drive the story while everyone else was getting comfortable with the game. And being able to sort of push Lutra into the limelight kind of helped expel that a little bit. But by the time that arc came to an end, Dark and Nora had come so far in their character and their storytelling abilities that Phantasm wasn't really needed anymore. But also, that was about the time that Next Gen started. So at that point, Tej and I were ready to sort of pull back the reins from Tej just having to do two totally separate story arcs. And it helped me because at that point, I mean, we pretty much all remember the joke that it was basically two GMs anyway.
Yes.
So we said, okay, well, we're going to push this in the direction where we can have a story that is actually co-GM'd. And that's when we sort of came up with the idea, okay, well, I'll create a new character that is able to be a PC, but is able to take a step back so I can sort of step in as the GM.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I need to apologize to both of you about that, because when that first started, I was very apprehensive about having two GMs, because I'm I can't keep track of the story. But at the end of it, I'm looking at it now, that actually worked way better than I was feeling it was when it started.
And eventually we will finish that arc.
And it worked way better than it ever should have.
I'm not going to lie. I was apprehensive about it, but I'm something? both between the two of us, we're both good enough thinking on our feet that if this comes crashing down in a blaze of glory, we'll figure a way to put out the fire and work with the remains.
And honestly, that's what a lot of it was. There was a little bit of discussion, but Tej and I have improvised pretty much most of the story arc. Outside of, hey, where are you going with this? It was, I would throw stuff out there, and Tej would adapt his story to meet what I did, and then I would adapt my story to deal with what Tej did, and we'd both be dealing with everything you guys did, and
because we definitely did stuff to y'all.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that really, like Hopi said, apprehensive about it a little bit. Still, again, not necessarily first session, but still, I'm still learning the games. I'm still not comfortable in the games. I'm a lot more than I was 3 years ago.
Right.
But going from, I know this GM, I haven't had Crim GM, now I've got both of them GMing, it was an interesting experience, and it's one that I've enjoyed immensely.
I think it also illustrates like that natural thing of trust that was really getting built up as we were playing this, because you guys trusted one another to not basically try to win over the other. You just kind of said, let's just tell a story, see what happens, hold on tight. And we just kind of all trusted each other, especially the GM. Yeah. It was very, very evident. Yeah.
And back to the question at hand, favorite arcs. I have to say, as much as I loved where Anton went. Yes, there's the running joke if he changed.
Right, but that's a show of evolution, not just as the character, but of you as a player.
Yeah, right, absolutely.
But really, the final arc of Anton, where he became the Arthurian Knight, and really took charge of the show for a while. I mean, that was a real, it focused on Anton for a while, and it was a lot of fun to be in that spot and drive the narrative.
Absolutely.
And that's something, and not just drive the narrative, but be part of the GM storytelling at that point.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is you bring that up, and that actually ties into the Phantasm, because those arcs sort of ended together. Because it was the end of the Phantasm arc, it was also the end of Anton's arc, basically.
True, yeah.
Like, the big story points all sort of came together. Yes, Anton stuck around for a little bit because, you didn't know the other character you wanted to build, so we threw Anton back in just to sort of give hey, we have this. But that was really the culmination of his arc, was at the same time with Phantasm. And honestly, like OPT said, as a GM, to see not just one, but two characters basically complete a full story cycle is incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm happy more than anything, I'm happy with the way we decided. Because originally, and Teach, you'll remember this, we were going to kill Anton off.
Right. But the thing is I had to talk you out of that without saying why I was talking you out of it, because I knew at that time what was going on with Phantasm. Like, I don't know if OPT, Dark, and Chambi can emotionally handle both characters dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it worked out so much better because Anton and Phantasm, while yes, they didn't necessarily see eye to eye all the time, they had very mutual respect for each other. And so Anton losing that partner and seeing his family now, he's just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And honestly, I have to say that I'm glad Anton actually did stick around in the different capacity, because even if it was that small interaction, going back to the pile driver story, even if it was that small interaction, that was sort of the passing of the torch of, everything that Phantasm showed. Champ's character did not exist when Phantasm was around.
That's true.
So everything that Phantasm showed was never sort of going to be able to be displayed towards Kestrel, except when Anton did it through the interactions you guys had. Because even though Lutra had the biggest connection to Phantasm. We all know, and I'm sure this will be a topic of discussion. We all know Lucha was in no place to discuss anything Phantasm.
No, he was so unaffordable about it.
No, he was not.
No.
Yeah. You know, and part of like with Anton staying around, honestly, based on what happened like between like the end of that whole story arc and the beginning of like the next gen arc, Anton was really the only backbone the team had. Because
pretty much, yeah.
Boucher was gone off, doing his thing, and was more like deep into his own demons than before. Lucha, as we'll probably talk about it later, wasn't dealing with his own demons. Kestrel was new, and Krim's character Jay was also new. So, at that point, Anton is like the only one coming back and being like, "Yo, guys, no team,
time to work."
Yeah,
no, absolutely. And that I honestly think if we had put a new character in there for me, I think we would have struggled.
I think so too.
To produce. I think that was the right call to hold Anton longer.
Yeah. He needed to be that glue for season.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
He needed that kind of
and that was really where the Anton armor was like. We had to come up with something, and that's kind of talking on this with the whole power swapping. I was never comfortable with Anton at the start because I built him, didn't think about combat. I just went, okay, this is kind of what I want to build, and then like. We got into an aerial fight, and I'm like, cried. And then, so we started moving the powers, and we came up with the whole Earth powers, and we just kind of transitioned him through of, not necessarily what I needed, but more of how can I provide the same thing for the team with a slightly better power set. I don't know, Tej, you've got something for me.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you bring up the Earth powers, because you might not know this, but when you said, hey, I want to switch a power set, and you said, hey, can we do this? That conversation was what actually spurred the Season 2 arc.
Nice.
Like, his conversation about the Earth powers is what spurred the whole elemental medallions from Season 2.
Nice.
And I think that was my personal favorite arc, is going into that whole elemental aspect. They just let me do so much more stuff from Valkyrie that I wanted to do.
Yeah, and to me, like, that was awesome because, you guys conveniently happened to line up elementally without me doing anything.
Right?
It really did. It worked really well.
It was very... I remember... I don't remember when I realized it, but at some point when I did it, I'm like, wow, how did that actually happen? Because there's no way anyone planned that.
No, because when he said I want to do magic, and I'm like, I think I want to stick with the Guardian theme, and my light bulb went off. I'm like, that lines them up for the 4 cardinal elements. Yes!
You had such a field day with that, too.
So Tej drove me right off the bus with that.
And I agree with Dark. Like, I personally loved that arc because...
That was a fun arc. It definitely was.
Well, as an arc, it accomplished 2 things. One, I got to tell the overarching story about all of the medallions, but at the same time, I got to have individual story arcs for each person involving their own medallion and the quest to get it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, that was beautiful.
Yeah, if I had to pick an episode, that 4x4 is probably one.
I was gonna get into 4x4 in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll bring something up after we're done with these specific things because and it's really going to be a discussion that TGE and I heavily weigh in on, but there's something I do want to touch in on because it has a lot to do with everything BCC. So we'll come back to it.
Yeah. So
mark cliffhanger on your bingo card.
Yes, mark cliffhanger on your bingo card.
Right.
So Chammy, before we get to me, what was your favorite arc and/or moment and/or story or whatever?
It's so hard because my natural inclination is that I liked when I came in. That was fun, but it's really difficult because there were so many good moments in it in the entire span of BCC. But the things that stuck out to me the most, the things I most enjoyed, weirdly enough. Where there were a lot of moments where, it was during the parts before I even joined up with you guys. Like that whole elemental quest where you guys are going after the coins and you guys are going into just all these different kind of places and seeing these different people. And you talk to these people that were it was almost like an alternate dimension thing. And you had that really hyper guy.
Oh, Eric!
Yes.
Yeah.
And you had all these different elements. I remember like when I was watching that, and I was like watching this, I'm like, this is actually a really awesome story. Like, I kind of wish I was here.
Yeah.
Like,
So
that was so fun.
Real quick aside on Eric. For those who don't know, Eric was the speedster character who rented a loft from Casey, and he paid his rent by electrically charging the machines that were keeping Hunter alive.
Yeah.
But he was a speedster who was obsessed with trying to save his friend from the past, but every time he kept going back, he couldn't do it. But he was extremely hyperactive, so I was talking a lot faster than I normally do, and I'm purposely slowing myself down here as I'm saying this because I'm feeling the Eric vibe. The episode, like when we were done the issue where Eric was in, I literally had to go outside at midnight and walk around my neighborhood for a half hour because I was so hyperactive because of just doing it.
I remember you saying that. And I remember thinking, I'm like, dude, how is he keeping this up for this long? Because, like, you've had Eric in here and there, but, like, that was, like, at least half of an entire episode dedicated.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, can you guys just leave? I'm tired of this. Please go away!
That's right. We were
Stop
just
talking
there
to me,
forever, just, like, playing out whatever it was.
Yep.
Yeah, watching that was probably one of my favorite experiences. And I actually also really loved the, I think it was in the Pyramid, I forget which exact episode it was, but when Lutra found that lab, I think it was a lab, or like, he like found something that was like about his past, and like you found some real...
That actually was going to be the next thing I brought up, because
yeah,
my favorite episode as a GM is the one you're talking about, Season 1, Episode 10, Paradise Lost.
Yes, Paradise Lost. That's it.
Yes. Yeah. And to me,
Which,
the reason...
honestly, do we have the link to that somewhere? We should by now.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube. It's on YouTube. I'm sure you can find it. But Paradise Lost, from a GM perspective, there was no fighting in that episode. Or if there was, I don't remember.
Wasn't. I think that was the first time we'd actually not had any like real fighting.
Yeah. But that episode was the first time as a GM where I laid off of the gas pedal with relying on Crim and Phantasm and dove in, and it wasn't just OPT and Lutra. It was a Lutra-centric episode. Like, 100%. That was the Lutra-centric episode. But to see the emotion that everybody put into that episode, when there was no fighting, just to see all of that.
Yeah.
It's been, 2.5 years since that episode came out, and I still talk about how much I love the RP in that episode, because that, from my perspective as a GM, was the first episode where I saw everybody get into the RP, and I'm like, okay, we have something here.
Yeah. It really helped me get into like the real mindset that Lucha would be going through right then, because everyone was reacting to, you know, the whole scene and whatnot. So it felt much more natural when I was practically crying, and I've done that more than a few times while playing Lucha.
You talked to me for so long about that episode. Like, after we finished, I remember like we hung out not too long. I think after that episode like went off, or at least like you talked to me about that episode after it happened for so long, because it was so integral to Lucha and his character.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about that is that was back when we were still pre-recording them and playing them on a tape delay.
Right.
So we had this happen, and we have this big emotional scene, and there was nobody live. We were just doing it. Yeah. So, like, that would have been even crazier had, like, there been a live chat reacting with it.
Yeah.
Because we didn't go live. I think we didn't even go live till Season 2.
No, it was literally the end of Season 1 is when we finally...
It was right after
one of the recorded ones.
I want to say it was Episode 12 is when we actually...
It might know, yeah. But it was crazy that to this day, like, we've had a bunch of fantastic episodes. That's the one that still stands out to me. The other one Nora mentioned earlier was 4x4. And that was a fun episode for a completely different reason, because, again, back in Season 2, we didn't have Chammy. It would have been 5x5 otherwise. But that was sort of the whole, everyone's been split up at the end of the season because, you know, bright, blinding flash of light.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do was I wanted to have small individual episodes to sort of, again, progress people's story arcs. And 4x4 was interesting because Crim was missing for when we initially did it live. So we did Crim's a little bit later, but that was just 4 individual stories.
Yep.
And they all ended up tying themselves back together eventually. But that to me...
No, I want to say mine was the one that was separate, because I pulled... OPT was streaming it. I pulled Lutra in on it.
Yeah.
You did. I remember watching
Yeah.
Right, yeah, okay, yeah. But there, yeah, because that's what, that is what it was. Anyway, we did that, and the fact that we were able to do also OPT Goldfish on dark screen. Lucha, calm down. They're just snack crackers. They're just snack crackers.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, but to be able to sit there and not just to do the scenes, but to be doing it live and have the entire crew here while I'm doing a one-on-one session with somebody, and the other two people are just sitting there and they're like, "Ooh, this is good. Where's it going? Mm-hmm. To see that was fantastic.
Right. Actually,
and ultimately,
I was gonna say, Nora. Actually, it was Krim did have the separate one. You're thinking about later.
Oh, you're thinking of Soldier's Tale.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Too many solo episodes.
Yeah.
But to me, the fact that we were able to do solo episodes have been fantastic as well. Because from a GM perspective, making a solo episode or solo adventure is so much of a different animal than making a group adventure. Because with a group adventure, the players can bounce off themselves. Mm-hmm. With a one-on-one, it's you and the player. That's it. And if they don't think as creatively as you do, you have to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I feel like that's a shit.
So I know I barely mentioned it, but my favorite arc in this whole thing has to be when we got Lucha addicted to Blitz.
I was actually going to bring that up too. One of my favorite arcs was Anton and Kestrel being buddy cops.
Yeah.
Which
yes. I need the Anton and Kestrel buddy cop.
Yeah, that has to be just his own thing.
And we talk about this, when we put Chammy into the show, we figured Kestrel and Lucha would play off of each other.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't.
No one saw Anton and Kestrel coming. No one.
No, and that's what made it
so where where Melchior got Lucha drunk. That was great.
That was,
Oh, that was so good too.
But that's been the great thing is like even those moments, like Dark and I've had some great moments. Mm-hmm. We've been antagonizing each other the entire time,
and it's been
fantastic antagonizing.
Yeah,
because it hasn't been like the. Go ahead.
We finally get our quote-unquote fight, and I roll 1, he rolls a 20, and it's automatically over.
I remember that.
Yeah. The best part about the antagonizing is it wasn't the whole, it wasn't the players hating players, it was the brothers antagonizing each other.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was fantastic.
It was, yeah.
But it's it's like we were a giant family, and we are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You had Anton and Phantasm kind of being the heads of the family, and then everyone else kind of had their brother or their role.
Yeah.
And then you just had me as the sarcastic AI to antagonize.
Yeah.
But the thing, but OPT, like you were talking about the Blitz thing, that was a huge thing for you.
That oddly came up before the finale where Phantasm died or ended. Teach had mentioned something about introducing drugs, designer drugs and whatnot, into the next storyline. And I remember at one point, I think it was either right before the finale or a week before, I wrote to him, I'm like, here's a way to possibly introduce this. What would happen if Lucha just got addicted to one of these things? Because we've established he's completely naive about a lot of things. So, not that he went out to get addicted to something, he just kind of did.
Right, which is why it had to be an energy drink.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And I remember thinking, I don't know how I was going to have him do it. The reasoning why, other than just he's just started drinking and suddenly he just got addicted to it. And then Phantasm died. And I remember...
Again, I knew this was coming when he has this conversation, so I've already planted the seed.
So I'm like, oh my god, I know what's going to happen-ish, whatnot. With that point, we had established that Lucha had wanted to start making music and whatnot, because I'm like, I did the culinary thing, but I want Lucha to have another hobby.
We'll talk about culinary thing in a minute.
Yeah. And then, I came up with the idea that Lucha would want to write a song about his fallen friend Gale, because especially when we got back and nobody remembered him, that was devastating to him. So I wrote this 5-page journal entry thing about Lucha's change over 3 months when he decided to come up with the idea to make this song. At the same time, he was also trying to learn how to fly the jet, because he was basically trying to do the things Phantasm had done, Because, again, that was just his thing. He was kind of getting obsessed with that. And then he started realizing that he doesn't have enough hours in the day because he had to start sleeping, so he'd have energy drinks to pep him up and whatnot, and that's when he stumbled on this Blitz. And I wrote these journal entries, like I said, 3 of them, in such a way. The first one's very long, very, like, this is what's going on with him. The second one is, you know, you can see a bit of a change in tone, and then the third one is just... like, he's gone at that point. And that starts up with the season when he's, like, an angry, angsty teenager, basically. I remember when this wasn't entirely, like, what I had thought of when I first had Lucha start writing the song, but I remember at one point I said, and I told you about this, Teach, I'm like, this is the issue Lucha has. If he ever finishes the song, that means he has to stop working on it, which means he has to stop. And when he stops, he remembers how much it hurt to lose his friend, which is not something it's nothing he's experienced before. So I turned all of that work into this emotional, like, if I stop working, it hurts. And that is really one of my favorite things I think I've done, like, with Lucha over this entire thing. Well,
from the GM perspective, my favorite thing about that was the fact that everybody else tried, and it took Hunter basically telling I'm not friends with you anymore to snap him out of it.
That got him to run off, and then, you know, Hunter basically confronting him with your song is done. You did it.
Yeah.
You finished it. What's wrong with you? And forcing him to admit like what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Bonus points real quick. Does anybody remember the flavor of the Blitz?
Blue raspberry.
No.
Blue electric raspberry, something like that.
Electric blue raspberry.
But yeah, no, that was another fun session because again, it showed the personality of Lucha. And I think what we've all said is the personalities that our characters have made this so much fun, and we haven't even touched some of the other side projects we've done.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we're going to get to the side projects.
No.
Well, I mean, if you think about it from like where I started with Malkir, of just kind of like being the guy with a dark past to where he's come now, I think he's grown just a ton, almost as much as Lucha has.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's a point you can tell when both Dark, both you and Nora, when you guys both became much more comfortable role playing, like it's just one of those things. It's amazing to see the transition. And Nora, I always remember the moment that it snapped with me that you were like, "Oh my gosh, Nora's actually role playing," and it was a stupid little thing. You and Kestrel are about to go to Gentech, and T just starts off with the scene with you guys there, and you just pull it back. Wait, no. And you pull it back into the garage so you can show off this gaudy-ass car to Kestrel. And the moment you did that, I remember thinking, holy crap, Nora's role-playing. He just came up with the scene by himself. This is it. Oh my god, it happened.
And then Kestrel facing in and getting stuck in the trunk.
Yeah. Going back to like favorite scenes, that scene of Kestrel fusing through the trunk of the car and getting stuck inside, that was probably one of my favorites. It's not my personal favorite, but it's one of them.
And without that scene, you don't get Squirrel with the pile driver.
No,
you don't go down that path at all.
Nope, not at all.
And to go back to the other crazy scenes, there's one other crazy scene that you guys pulled off, which, you know, probably the best way I've ever been involved with. Yep, nope, we're skipping this encounter. Let's cook for the octopus, everybody!
That was a stroke of genius.
That was what you guys looking at, like we've completed this game. We understand.
Yep, you guys literally went and played Chopped with the octopus.
Yes.
I think my personal favorite scene skip of sorts was when Kestrel and Malkir devised a plan to get Malkir inside the barrier with the matchbook.
Oh yes!
That was beautiful.
I love that.
That's the same episode. It was like, let's just bypass this whole thing, and now he's just inside.
Yep. Yes, I'm going to take your MacGuffin and bypass it. And I'm just like, Yep, that works. Oh, crap.
I did not plan for this contingency.
Nope.
Guys, I don't even remember how the whole thing of, like, making dinner for the octopus came up. I just remember we were...
He mentioned he was hungry.
That's true. He mentioned he was hungry. Like, oh, I can make something for you. And that's just...
Then we started to figure out what was on the ship for food.
Like, I rolled Lucius Culinary, and, like, if I remember right, I freaking, like, destroyed it. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it was like 26 or something stupid.
Yeah.
Well, what kicked it off, though, is that we had actually been playing things like Masks and also things like Middleton City, where like we would have these encounters and we would have these circumstances where the solution to the problem was not to fight, it was to find out what does this guy most want, how do we get this for them, so we can figure this out. It was like solving a puzzle. Mm-hmm. And so I think by that point, like, we saw octopus is hungry. I can cook.
Yeah. Well, and to bring the point to that, we haven't talked much about combat. One of Tej's tropes, and it's been so much fun, is his combats are not just SmackDown combats.
No.
Yeah.
They're all puzzles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the only one who does that, though. Krim does it too.
No, Krim does it too. And I love it because it forces you to go and think about the scene. It's not just, I rolled a punch the snot out of him. Mm-hmm. It's, what can I use? How can I be creative?
Yes.
To win this fight.
Yeah.
Like when we fought that giant wind bag thing or wind demon thing, we're like, okay, how do we use the Anton to fix this thing?
We turn into a vacuum after Nora gets kicked through the uprights.
Yes.
I just remember the scene where Malkir flipped inside the dragon's mouth.
Yes.
You're just like, are you sure you want to do that?
Yes.
Yes, that was so good.
Malkir versus the dragon in general was a great scene.
That was so fantastic.
That's back to the medallions. Yeah. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
But the combat puzzles, Anton had the Guardian puzzle where the solution was just to not fight.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to sit here and go through a round of combat and have to actually think, not just, what am I going to roll next, but how am I going to determine what my action is? It's more than just the system. And I really do think, and you said we're not going to get too much into the other shows, but introducing Masks really opened all of us to that creativity of, let's find a way around combat.
I think if you just watch BCC, you would notice the time when we started playing Masks. It's like when we stopped doing combat.
Wait, Nora. You're saying about finding ways to stop combat? You mean like Jay did?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
By walking outside and just
that was another
basically stopping an entire encounter.
That was another great one.
That was fantastic. Anton was looking for a fight. We hadn't had combat in weeks, and I'm like,
Anton's looking for a
fight.
Yeah.
I have this encounter planned. Jay walks out, rolls ridiculous. Like, well, no, that's it. That sounds so good.
I remember you rolled that. I'm like, he probably just skipped something big, didn't he? Yeah, sure enough. God, it's like, and Champ can verify this. I might live in games to skip combats.
It's his thing.
But it's become a thing for all of us now.
Yeah.
It's fun to skip combat.
Mm-hmm.
Combat's don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Combat's fun.
Oh yeah.
I actually like the power sets.
Yeah.
Like, it's fun to be creative.
Yeah.
Let's just let's blanket the statement here is because half the skipping combats is okay, well, let's cook for the octopus. Let's get the supposed weak one trapped inside the bubble with a matchbook of all things. Surprise!
Yeah, right. I remember looking at the rule set for Call of Cthulhu and just at one point because I had this odd urge to try to run it. I never did, but I remember somebody saying in that game specifically, but it feels like it goes into BCC and all of our Mask games. It's if you're in a fighting encounter, you made a mistake, not there's something wrong with the game per se, but the players have made a mistake in game and now they have to fight their way out of it.
Yeah.
especially in that game, because combat was not something that you were supposed to survive all that often. But like in our games anymore, it feels like if we're in a fight, it's either like a forced encounter boss, like you need to have this, or something went wrong and now we have to fight our way out of it. And that's
I don't think teach every random encounters for us.
No.
Like,
very rarely do I have random encounters. Requires a random encounter. I have enough things. They might not be loaded into Roll20, but I have enough stuff on my computer that I can quickly generate one. Mm-hmm. But you guys talk about skipping encounters. Y'all skipped a boss fight. Like, instead of fighting the boss, you're like, I'm just going to crack the crystal and end the fight.
Oh yeah!
Y'all skipped the boss fight.
Well, if I remember right, part of that was because, like, Lutra did the spear on Salome or whatever, Blackheart or whatever her name was.
Yeah, you crit her into the...
and I crit the initial roll. And it's like, I don't forget why Lutra was that pissed, but it was something that, like, either in fight or just in general. Oh, that's right, because she pretended to be Hunter's mother and whatnot and wasn't. So he was just so angry. I had him charge at her, and yeah, I crit the roll. It's like, we're done.
Yeah, no, like, so yeah, you can't even say, like, because you've skipped a boss fight, like. Mm-hmm. The best part, like, my favorite part about that whole arc, though, is we have how many episodes, like, the whole Worlds Collide event, like, we finally did a comic event, we did the whole Worlds Collide thing, then you guys arrive back home, like, wait, it's been 3 seconds, where'd you go?
Yeah, exactly.
It felt so epic to us, and then to the rest of the world, like, no.
Yeah, and that again led so much into, like, Lutra's issues that, one, everybody, like, especially when Hunter was questioning, like, what they had done, because it's like, we went into the future or whatever, and we saved everybody and whatnot, and it's like, no one believed, like, and we had this friend, Phantasm, and no one remembered him. Like, all of this stuff that he had done, like, was just gone.
Well, if you remember, the reason behind that, though, is because we brought up, I remember, I had you talk to someone and look this up. Initially, like, I had you look something up because I wanted the Hebrew phrase for one who was outside fate, which is Mikutzel Goral, which we've determined, right? Initially, the plan was that was going to be Ven. Like, and that's why he ended up getting you guys to the future and all that. But when Krim's like, this is how I want to end the Phantasm arc, it makes so much more sense for Mikutzel Goral to be Phantasm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was... And I love the fact, and you can't really see it in the shows. I've seen some of it. But how much of it has just fallen in place.
Oh, yeah.
Where the idea is there, you can see the idea, and then 5 or 6 episodes later, someone falls on the idea and takes it forward.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Like, it's funny, you bring that up, you look at the shows, and, like, you see them, like, none of the things we put on YouTube are edited. They are just the raw footage. So everything we talk about, everything that happens, you see. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and look at even some of the earlier episodes, a lot of it looks and feels, at least from the GM side of things, fairly seamless. Mm-hmm. Like, I would say probably 65 to 70% of everything you've seen here has been improvised off the cuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks pre-planned. That's what's so nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, because I know we brought the White House back where we burned it down. We came back to that season 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So it's that the players, all of us remember so much of the story because it's so memorable.
Oh yeah.
That we can pull stuff out and force you to improvise, force Krim to improvise back into other events that we've already experienced.
Right. And for me personally, from the GM side of things here, is 3 years ago when we started this, like, I don't know if you remember me talking about this, but I'm like, crap. 3 years ago when we started this, I was not comfortable as a GM at all. Mm-hmm. Like, I was like, didn't want to run it. I'm like, nope, I promised all these guys a game, so I'm going to run this because I promised them a game and I'm going to get through this. I'm not comfortable as a GM. Now, I'm extremely comfortable with it 100%. But the thing that I think this game has made me do more than anything else, and I'm not saying improvise, because as a GM, you're always improvising.
Right.
Always.
What this game has forced me to do as a GM is to take a look at my characters, my NPCs, specifically my bad guys, and to understand their motivations. Because when you understand your bad guy's motivation, you can more easily react to whatever crazy shenanigans your players want to pull.
Yeah.
It also leaves you like, I'm going to, again, go back to the octopus as the example here. The octopus was attacking because he was hungry.
Yeah.
Right? And you guys looked like food. You offered him food. Okay. He's not going to attack because you gave him what he wanted. You gave him what his motivation was. So knowing what your bad guy's motivations are can allow you to take a situation as a GM where you're like, I don't know what's happening, and be able to adapt to it.
Right.
And to me, if there's one piece of advice I'm giving is basically it's twofold. It's don't be afraid to improvise, but understand you don't necessarily have to build your bad guys right away. I'm going to use Kismet as the example here. Like, I brought up Kismet several times. I did not have her built until the final encounter. Oh, nice. But I knew what her motivations were, so if you encountered her, I knew what her powers were. I knew I could improvise what her powers did. Mm-hmm. But if you encountered her, I knew what her motivations were, so it was easy enough for me to go and understand where we're going. And to me, as a GM, it's more important to know what your NPC's motivations are than it is to know, well, they can punch you with the force of 3 trucks.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
And I want to thank you guys for that. You've made me a confident GM in the feel like I can take any turn at me now and be able to improvise it out because I understand what the motivations of the NPCs that I'm throwing at you guys are.
Mm-hmm.
I can't picture you as not being a GM. Like, I remember being very surprised the first time LBT told me, like, it's like, oh yeah, this is like Teach's first time GMing, and like he always is a player in his other games. I'm like, what? He's the kind of personality that always has to GM, right? Like, he just has that voice.
Right.
No, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when I finally got to actually be in the same game as a player with Teach. It's like, hey, this is different, and it's great.
Wait, this is now I know how it feels.
Right, yeah, which is the only time we've been able. Well, now then. When Krem took over BCC, it was one time, but like I think it started with Cham's other game. It's just like, wow, this is how he is on the player's side. It's interesting. I finally get to see that, and not from the GM side of it too,
and not from the what the heck's happening side of it.
Now what do I do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the topic of GMing, and I alluded to this earlier, we're not going to cliffhang you to a later time with this. So, Teach, one thing that you and I have, solidified our GMing prowess on, and something I think that has frustrated OPT more than anyone, is our ability to just take reference for almost anything we had. Yeah. And I would say probably the 2 largest ones are the Marvel Cinematic Universe because, well, let's face it, everything Marvel has entered our story arc at some point.
Yep.
And the Final Fantasy XII Zodiac.
Yes.
So I think for me, there's always a fine line. You don't want to sit there and just completely envelop your story copying other property.
Right.
But I honestly think having that tool to go to has been invaluable because not because it gives us free content or whatever, but it gives us something to build off of. Mm-hmm. And for me, when I'm not devoting all my time to this, but I'm brainstorming or whatever, it's like, well, what's intrigued me lately? And when I run into things like that, where I can sort of draw inspiration from those things, That's why I've always incorporated them. That's why we were so Marvel heavy when I first took over the BCC storyline.
I mean,
when we had basically all these different Marvel people dispersed out to all these other areas. The inclusion of Doctor Strange, and all of that. I mean, that's what a lot of it was. Is because I just got over a binge watch of the Avengers.
No,
and I'm like, I totally, because we sort of already, with Casey and Stark, we already sort of played with the idea that while it wasn't the Marvel universe, it was a universe which the Marvel characters would reside in. So it allowed me to bring them in. And it's not that they were going to take over the story, but it gave me material to work with. And I know that Tej did a lot of the same stuff. So I would say, what do you really feel that benefited us and Tej, having that stuff?
To me, it benefits a couple things. Because one, like you mentioned, and it goes into what I was saying earlier, is knowing people's motivations. When you take an established character, especially one you know a lot about, you already know what their motivations are. That's one less thing you have to think about. Mm-hmm. And number two, it allows you to take these established things, these established ideas that most people at least know a little bit about. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, there are certain things, no matter what the genre is, that people know. Like, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to know who Hulk Hogan is.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be a comic book fan to know who Captain America is, or Superman, or Batman. Like, there are certain things that you just know. And even having that little bit of knowledge as a player, or as a GM, it's great to me because, okay, you can take what people know, and you can take that and you can either expand upon it, or take it in a complete different direction, but still keep it true to the source material. And from a GM's perspective, having something with a rich source material to draw off of is a nice thing to have because it's less you have to think about. And with a game that has 5 players and so many moving parts, having one less thing off your plate to think about is fantastic.
I bet.
So that to me is what the benefit of it is. And I will full on 100%. The reason I brought in the Zodiacs and them specifically is because I used a variation of them in my real life game, and I already had them built.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And it worked out great, because a lot of the things that we brought in, like from the universe or whatever, worked out great in one way or another to tie into what was already going on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think that at any point any of those extra things really stole the show. No. I think that was a key piece to it. You could bring in.
I would like to counterpoint that the phone conversation between Lutra and Rocket did in fact steal.
Okay, well, I mean that but like,
that's true. I forgot about that one.
It was a scene. Yeah. It wasn't an episode.
That's true.
Right.
We never really went full down the rabbit hole into those episodes.
Right.
We stayed within our realm. We brought these characters in to enhance the world around us and to make it more lived in.
Exactly, and that's the other thing, and that's what it does is, okay, when you take a look at any tabletop game, whether it's Bay City Chronicles, whether it's Critical Role, whether it's whatever podcast you're listening to, it's focused. It's focused on the story of the main characters. Mm-hmm. By adding in little snippets of the Marvel universe or whatever, it doesn't give you don't get the full zoom out effect, but that little bit of knowledge, that okay, these guys are like, for example, this crew is taking care of things. They're over in San Francisco, based Oakland, doing their thing. So what's happening in New York? Well, this is the Marvel universe, so the Avengers are taking care of things in New York, things of that nature. So it shows you how it's more than just what's happening in Bay City or what's happening in wherever. It shows you that the world is living and breathing and is moving on and is doing things that we're not necessarily seeing and being a part of.
And I do also have to say, another thing it does, and this always seems a little taboo in tabletop and storytelling, and it's the concept of a cop-out, of a way to answer a question that may arise by simply having an easy answer. So one way that I have a cop-out, and spoilers, because this is going to happen, it's one of the parts that I already have established, is, well, a cop-out I'm going to have is Nick Fury. Nick Fury knows everything, it seems.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a cop-out I have. Doesn't have to have a lot of reasoning, because a lot of people know, okay, Nick Fury's informed.
Right.
So if Nick Fury says it, well, that's how they find out about it. And having that as a crutch that you can do every now and again is very beneficial, because it doesn't lead to a 2-hour explanation of something that does very little to progress the storyline.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
You call part of your toolbox.
Yes.
Yep.
It makes sense too. So we can waste like an hour not progressing the story at all just by having Lucha cook dinner. So
I mean, we've done that several times.
yes.
I think my favorite part about this is, I want to cook. I get like 2 points in culinary. Rose low. Okay, I put 3 skill points in this. We're gonna be good. Rolls lower.
Yeah. To be fair, I had a quote unquote an idea, because I didn't want to just dump a bunch of more points into the cooking thing and have Lucha suddenly just out of nowhere become like this incredible chef. It was one of these things. I only put a skill point into it if Lucha had if I'd actually rolled the culinary roll during the session.
And that, to me, is, I think this is a good place to end on, that's what I love about all you guys here, is there's the concept of the power gamer or the min-maxer, who is just going to do what's best for whatever. And yes, you're gonna try and do things to make sure and even if you're dark, you can give yourself plus 20 to hit, and you're still not going to hit anything. But the fact that you saying something like that, the fact that I know I do it, but the fact that every single person here is like, well, this doesn't make sense in the story how we would have got it, so we're going to pump the brakes on that until we can find a way to slot it in.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, is incredible.
Yeah, like I don't know about the rest of you. I had powers and whatnot that I put on my sheet that I'm like, I'm not using this yet until there's a point in the story where I can have Lucha discover it.
I have so many of those in all the games where it's just like, yeah, I'm just leaving that there for something.
Yeah.
I had skills like that too. Yeah.
Honestly, I have to say that having OP Phantasm in the setting that I did was actually really enjoyable, though, because we designed him to where he wasn't just going to come in and save the day, because his purpose wasn't to win battles, it was to drive the story into battle.
Right.
And like, one of my favorite moves of his was just the ability to send people to the dream realm.
Right.
And I mean, as much as OPT hates being in people's minds, I mean,
he's been there quite a bit.
Yeah.
That was such a critical part
in his mind.
Of the Phantasm arc.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was.
Oh yeah, no, that was very true.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, as crazy and as much fun as this has been, we're creeping up on midnight, guys. So, I got a question. Want to do part 2 next week?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, because we haven't even touched on like nearly anything.
Yeah, like we haven't even. There's still. I have a bunch of things over here on this piece of paper I wanted to get to. Haven't touched them yet. We still have all the offshoots and the math stuff to get to. So I'm thinking next week we do part 2. We ring in the new year with part 2. We do all that. We prepare for what's coming up next.
Right.
Well, Teach, I mean, if we're gonna do that, you and I at least have to do one thing.
Yes.
We both have to give a spoiling cliffhanger of one of the things that we want to talk about next week.
That's fair.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I'll give mine first.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fact that it is still totally not a space laser.
Ooh, I do love a good space laser.
But it's not a space laser.
You love a good space laser.
It's totally space laser. What are you talking about? Oh, he says it's not a space laser. What?
So Tej, what's your spoiler for next week?
Yeah.
What is my spoiler for next week? Well, you see, I could tell you, but it's more fun if I lock you into a room with no windows and no door and give a long, drawn-out explanation instead.
Casey. Yeah.
If we're doing this, though, I do have one, too.
Uh-huh.
Let's get the cat's tongue.
So, thank you all so much for sitting with us for this 2-hour roundtable discussion about us fun stuff we've done over the past couple of years, and we're going to do it. We're going to come back next week for round 2, and so on behalf of the entire crew here at Bay City Chronicles, Chameleon Ice, Crimson Avex, Dark Falls, Nerestra, OPT Lawyer, I'm TG, saying everybody, first off, have a happy holidays, have a happy new year, and thank you all for watching. Keep hailing. We all know how this works.
Bye, all.
Everyone.